Good afternoon, everybody.
Howdy.
So I heard y'all were already hard at it today. So you know, so you had the JV this morning, now you get the varsity this afternoon. So and I'm referring to Conway on that, not me.
Don't even try it. Who were their instructors this morning?
So somebody needs to tell Mike Fisher that, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Believe me, I will.
Ken and Mike presented
Okay.
on conflict resolution,
Okay.
and they were so proud of themselves, they decided to play golf the rest of the day.
Um,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know that's not happening. I just got a couple text from Ken a minute ago about some stuff going on. So now I'm not sure about Fisher. He may be out there.
We do have two absent, at least from this morning. I know Steve Janika is out on PTO, and then Dusty was not at this morning's class, so I don't expect him this afternoon either.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know he was taking some time off at some point, but I can't remember if it was this week or not. But yeah, I knew Steve was out.
I think Dusty's up here in the remarkable training.
Oh, the leadership. Yeah, the leadership class. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we've got leadership on top of leadership right now. So okay, so I think we've got everybody.
All
You want to
right.
go ahead and kick us off,
Yeah,
Conway?
I sure will. So I want to welcome everybody to our class this evening, the Professional Communication Leadership Program class, and we're going to have a good time. Myself, I'm one of the presenters, Conway from Thomasville Medical Center, and everyone knows Chip Pfeiffer, who is also a presenter for this particular class, Professional Communication.
Yep.
So what we want to do is kind of do an overview, and we're going to talk about our objectives for this class. As you see on your screens in front of you, we're going to use the best and most appropriate form of communication for every situation. We're going to learn what that is. We're also going to talk about writing clear and concise emails like a pro to relay facts efficiently so that our emails, those who are responding or receive those emails know what we're trying to say. And also conduct professional phone calls and the use of text appropriately in the work environment. And also determine when a meeting is most appropriate in communicating settings and creating professional documents and also overcome nonverbal and verbal communication barriers in the workplace. So we want to touch on all these, and we're going to start off with a group discussion. So me and Chip are going to work on this together. How do professional communication skills relate to leadership? That's a question to the group. Anyone want to help start us off? How do professional communication skills relate to leadership?
Anybody feeling brave?
So I would say as a leader, when you have issues come up in a building, like at a hospital, you need to be able to communicate that out to the other leaders in the facility and be able to know what you're talking about as situations come up. Or like if you have a shutdown, electrical shutdown in a hospital, you need to be able to effectively communicate that to everybody in the building, specifically leaders, and what it's going to look like when it actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
What about communication with your team? I mean, it's tough to lead a team if they don't know the direction that they're supposed to be heading. So did I?
John has his hand raised.
Yep.
Sorry. I would say just having the confidence and the skills for having effective communication to be able to dictate what you're trying to say and the points that you're trying to get across to everybody is pretty important for everybody who's working with you and working underneath you to, believe, hey, this guy knows what we need and there's no question as far as the communication goes. And then further down the road, there's no question of, hey, did I not communicate what I wanted to say properly or not?
Good,
John,
very
can
good.
you hear me better now? Can everyone hear me pretty
Yeah, it was a little muffled. Appreciate that, Conway.
better now though, right?
Correct, yes.
All right, very good.
Any other thoughts on this? What about advocating for your team? So if you're, yeah, you need something, you're trying to get resources for your team, you need to be able to communicate that professionally as well. I mean, if you can't make a good case for the things that you need, then obviously your team is going to suffer. So yeah, there's a lot of components to professional communication that relate to the leadership role. So okay. Any last thoughts before we move on? Take it away, Conway.
All right, let's get started. So I'm going to start off our discussion with learn objective number 1, selecting the best communication method. And we're going to, next slide will go into what we're going to talk about. So we have 4 of them that we're going to touch on. This is right now, you'll see the overview and we're going to go into depth on each one of these. So interpersonal communication, intrapersonal communication, small group communication, and public communication. So let's dive into our first one, interpersonal versus intrapersonal communication. Now, the 2 words may sound very similar, but as you can see on the screen, the spelling is different and they do have different meanings. The interpersonal communication is an exchange of ideas and feelings and thoughts between individuals verbally and non-verbally. And that goes into the fact of having a fundamental aspect of the human interaction. Like if I'm talking to Matt, is the communication. He's expressing his views, I'm expressing mine, we talk about it, and we come to a conclusion, right? Now, intrapersonal communication is a form of communication that takes place within the individual's mind. More or less, you can think of it like when we have to go over something and you say, how do I think I'm going to proceed with this situation? What's the best outcome? How am I going to get the best outcome from this? That little bit, that little self-talk, that little reflection, that little dialogue within ourselves, that's what is considered intrapersonal communication. As you see on the screen, it says, go back one slide, it goes into where people communicate with themselves to process the thoughts and emotions to make decisions. So that's the decisions that we have to make internally and what the outcome would be.
So you're not crazy if you talk to yourself.
You're not crazy. Just don't talk out loud. Keep it to yourself. Do not talk out loud. Keep it to yourself. The third group that we want to talk about is small group communication. And we may see this a lot at our individual facilities. The small group communication is a specific form of communication within a small, cohesive group of individuals for a common purpose. So usually we get together, if we're talking about water management, and there's a small group of us that get together and we express our opinions and ideas, but it's for the one purpose of what's the best for the facility when it comes, if we're talking about water management, for an example. Also, this type of communication is distinct from one-on-one interactions. And typically, when you have a small group communication, it ranges between 4 and 12 people that would categorize a small group form of communication. And our last area, public communication. And a lot of people do not like public communication. You know, they don't want to get up in front of anybody and speak. But public communication delivers a lot of information, a lot of ideas to a large group of people and a diverse audience. And it is, as you see on the slide, it is a very highly visible, impactful form of communication. Some of that may be when we go to see our favorite book writer and they get up before us and they're talking about their book, they're the author of the book. Or we may go to presentations or ASHE to hear lectures and debates. So all those are a form of public communication. Workplace communication types. So within our environment, our daily work environment here at Novant Health, we have multiple types of communication. You have verbal, nonverbal, digital, and visual. The verbal is the exchange of information of us talking, using our words and communicating in that way. And then you have the nonverbal, is an exchange of information without spoken words. Just like you see in the picture there. What do we think that handshake means? You know, it doesn't mean that they're arguing and they're not getting along. That handshake means I agree, let's seal the deal, nice to see you again. I mean, that handshake can say a lot of things, but that's that nonverbal part of communication. And then you have digital, like what we're doing right now. As you see, we're having a Zoom meeting, a class, and it's a digital way of sharing information, kind of like a public speaking, but in a digital format. And then we, of course, we have visual, which is the symbols and visual elements that we can use to relay information. So let's talk about workplace communication. That includes concise and conscious and unconscious messages. You know, standard workplace communication methods, which we all do every day. You got your emails, your phone calls, text messages, meetings that we go to. And in those meetings, we're talking about documentation, we're talking agendas, policies, all of that. But the question down at the bottom is, how do you determine what method of communication to use, right? Let's see, we'll find out. Let's go into more detail with that for our next slide. How about email? Email is a vehicle of communication that relays facts and relays information. Then we have a phone call. Then we have text messaging. And then, of course, sometimes we have to do the face-to-face conversation. And we're going to dive into detail on each one of these also. Learning objective number 2.
Yep, that's me. So writing effective and professional emails. So I know all of you are basically saying, hey, I do email every day. I know that type of thing, but there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. And to tell you the truth, I think that we do it so frequently. I think a lot of times we don't even think about what the email sounds like as we put it out there. So, there's a couple of good surveys here talking about professional communication, and this first one, 86% of team members believe that effective communication is important in the workplace. I don't know what the other 14% think, but that almost seems to be a slam dunk kind of thing to me about how important that communication is in the workplace. The second one about from Adobe, 81% of the team members reported that poorly written emails are a source of irritation. I know probably all of us have run into that before, where you get that email where it's really difficult to figure out exactly what the person's trying to say, or there's lots of grammatical errors that distract from what they're trying to get across, that type of thing. And then this survey from Grammarly, about 98% of team members believe that good writing skills are essential for career success. So that's a pretty good indication that this topic overall is important. So, email, obviously it's great for getting communication out to a lot of people and sharing facts and what have you. You know, there's a lot of times when you kind of think about though when it is appropriate to use an email, like communicating during non-business hours and across time zones. So one thing important there is that you may want to also think about who you're sending that email to, and potentially thinking about, do I delay the delivery of that? There are tools associated with that, so that so that you're not necessarily sending something to somebody, you know, at midnight or whenever it is that you happen to be working. It works well if, you know, obviously if the person that you're trying to get in touch with is hard to reach. That's a good way to go ahead and get that information to them, particularly when you know that they're tied up in meetings all day or what have you. If the subject matter is not time sensitive, that it's also a good thing. You know, if you don't need an answer right away, again, you're just trying to get some information out to somebody, and it's not critical. This is one that I have used a lot when you need a record of the communication. So if you're getting approval for something or something like that, it's good to have that so that, you know, 6 months from now, a year from now, when questions are asked about that, you can call that email out and say, well, no, you approved this. And then sharing, you know, files and what have you. It's a good way to be able to communicate a lot of information and attach those kinds of things, and then obviously relaying facts to a group. But also, if you go to the next slide, emails can lead to like wasted time. So, you know, like simple questions, you know, if you get into these back and forth emails, like multiple emails, in a lot of cases, it's a whole lot easier if you just pick up the phone and call somebody instead of getting into like what I call an email battle where you're back and forth, you know, with 15 emails. It takes a lot of time when you could potentially just pick up the phone, clarify in a minute or two, and then be on your way. And then response times, you know, a lot of us get a lot of email. So yeah, if you're depending upon somebody to respond to your email right away, I mean, you can wait for a long period of time before somebody gets back to you on something. So that can also waste some time. And then, or like I said, on some of these emails where it goes back and forth, you get looped in and you have to go back to the 20 emails to read and get the context of everything. That takes a lot of time. So there are times when email can you know, is not necessarily a great idea or can waste a lot of your time. So using email for project collaboration, it can decrease productivity. So again, you want to try to look at where email is effective, but in these cases, if you're using email and it's scattering that information, it makes it hard to try to put all the facts together when there's like, you know, there's 10 different emails about different components in regard to this a project that you're working on or whatever, and you're having to try to go back through and find all those emails. Or like if you're using project management tools, so like with Projecto is one of the things that we use as far as like project management tools. So if you're sending folks emails and then you're putting some comments in Projecto and you're hopping from one thing to another, all the information is not in the same place and it's difficult to hunt it all down. And then this is the one that gets me most of all, is duplication of effort. So if you as a leader are sending an email out to your team about something, if you're not clear about what you're looking for or who's doing what, then you can have multiple people working on the same thing at the same time and duplicating a lot of effort, which wastes their time and your time and leads to the productivity is not great. So and then the emails leading to confusion and miscommunication. So again, like what we talked about, these long email threads, you know, a lot of times people don't have patience to go through all that and get all the context. And so if they're looking at the latest or greatest version of the email, they may have missed some previous information and not understand completely what the issue is about. It's also, and this is true of text messages as well, you know, without having the vocal cues or kind of, it's really easy to misinterpret what somebody's saying. Where you've got it in writing, it may come across as being kind of aggressive or something where maybe you didn't really intend it to be that way. And then this last piece about things being like important stuff being buried in the email again. If people don't take the time to read all the way through, if you've written a long email and the most important part of it is right smack in the middle of it, they may not even get to that and miss what you're trying to say. So when do you want to avoid email? So an emotional messages obviously are ones like what we just talked about. Folks are you don't have tone of voice, facial expressions, and that type of thing to be able to help you figure out sort of how people mean certain things. So if you're really upset about something and you put it in an email, it's really difficult for the person that reads that to kind of figure out exactly where you're coming from on some of that stuff. We just talked about the project management tools. That is a better way, depending upon what you're working on. Obviously, if it's a project or something like that, it consolidates all that information together. It provides more real-time updates, and you can kind of see all of that in one place. That's a lot more effective way to communicate that information rather than 10 different emails that people are having to backtrack on. And then the structured feedback tools and collaborative documents. So in a lot of cases, there are tools that work way better to try to do some of the things that we're trying to do. So one of the things that pops into my mind is like when we do like performance evaluations. So we have a specific form for doing that. So there are definite questions that are asked and things to kind of cue into some of the stuff that you need to be talking about, rather than if you try to do that via an email, which would be inappropriate for a number of reasons, but would not necessarily get you exactly what you need to get to. So video calls and in-person meetings, that some of the benefit there is obviously that there's immediate questions and feedback you can get from that, rather than somebody getting your email that you sent 2 days ago and then where you're not necessarily thinking about it at the moment, and maybe they have questions. If you're able to go ahead and share directly what the topic is, then they have the opportunity to answer questions right then and there while it's active in your mind and theirs. So also visual aids and stuff, they can, like if you're trying to do something really complex, I know I run into this a lot of times where I'm sending out an email and I start kind of getting into a lot of detail, and next thing I know, that my email is like 3 pages long and bullet points and stuff everywhere, and it's very difficult to follow, where it may be a whole lot easier just to provide some sort of a visual aid, a graph or something like that to kind of get some of that message across. And then this about vulnerable to security breaches and unauthorized access. So that's one of the things also about email. You have to be very careful about sort of what you put in an email, because of some of the things. Like I think we have a really good DPS team that keeps our systems safe and what have you from hacking and that type of thing. But you do have to worry about that. And then another thing that comes up with a lot of our communications is if we get into some sort of legal action, that like emails can be subpoenaed to be used as evidence for various things. And so you really do need to think about sometimes some of the information that you do put in an email, particularly. So, and what I'm talking about there is like if we get some sort of like a patient complaint, there's been somebody that has been injured, we've had an elevator entrapment where somebody's been injured or something like that, and there could be the potential that somebody would bring suit against us for something like that. So if we've got a lot of information in emails about sort of what happened, all of that stuff can be subpoenaed for a trial. So you definitely want to be careful about what we put in an email. Writing emails, you want to make sure that you really do a good job with the subject line. And that's probably not something that you think a lot about sometimes, but it really does help a lot especially when you're communicating with folks that don't have a whole lot of time, or you know, you want to try to get the importance of the email across just really quickly and succinctly, so that if you've got a good descriptor in that subject line, it allows them to know, okay, this is important. I need to open this email and look at it right away, versus, you know, you put something in the subject line like "what you doing" or something like that. So they're probably going to avoid that one like the plague. It also helps from a search standpoint. Like if you have to go back and look for a specific email, having that information in the subject title helps a lot when you're looking back and trying to figure out that whatever that topic happens to be. Another thing is using a name in the subject line. That's another way to try to make sure that you get somebody's attention. And so, yeah, in a lot of cases, some of the marketers or people that like salespeople that reach out to you, they do this kind of stuff because they know it's going to get your attention. So, and then using the word urgent if the email is truly urgent. So you want to make sure that you know, if you do put that in the email, that you really mean it. But if you overuse that term, then people get to the point where they overlook it. That, okay, Chip's sending yet another urgent email, so that means that it's not really urgent because he uses that word all the time. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're accurate in the way that you do it. Here's some various examples of how you want to do that in the subject line or within the body of your email. And then when you're as a receiver of emails, you want to respond to them promptly. Ideally you'd like to try to do that within 24 hours. I know sometimes that's very difficult based on what we've got going on and the amount of email traffic that we get. But if you do need more time to respond, then you can shoot something back and basically say, hey, look, I saw your email, and if you can give me just another day or 2 days or whatever it happens to be, and I'll get back to you. Then at least they know that you have seen their email. And that they know that you're going to get a response back to them. Now, the important thing with this is making sure that you follow back up on that, because if you made that commitment to somebody that you're going to get back to them within 2 days or 3 days or whatever it is, and you don't do that, then that's going to create some issues. So, proofreading is very important. Making sure that again, we're talking about professional communication here. So if you're putting out stuff that like you've got misspelled words, grammatical errors, like missing words, things that don't make sense, it really colors the way that people look at you. And then also as far as how like if you're coming across really emotionally on something, in a lot of cases, I think a good rule of thumb is for to take, especially if you're responding right away to something in the heat of the moment, to take some time, maybe write a response and come back and take a look at it at a later date, or a later time, to make sure that as you reread it in a cooler moment, that maybe the language should be changed a little bit. And you want to make sure that the message is clear and concise, that you're not being overly wordy. I mean, you want to make sure that you get the right information to them in as few words as possible. The reply or reply all. So I think everybody has probably seen examples of this. That you definitely don't want to use the reply all if it's not needed. So if somebody sent that response and you're sending something back like sounds good or whatever, and you're replying back to 100 people that went out to, or whatever, it could be a really big group. That's people that will cause people to hate you. So, because I know that I know we all see that all the time where you've gotten 17 responses back to original email. Thanks. And all that kind of thing. So you're having to dispose of all those emails, and that takes your time. So, so if you do need to reply, or you feel the need to reply back to that person, just instead of replying all, then obviously just reply directly to that person that sent the email in the first place. And then, yeah, here's what we were talking about with the thanks. You know, you do want to make sure that you're expressing gratitude to people, particularly if they've done a great job with something or whatever. But again, you know, not replying to all on that or whatever. And then also, if you are sending a thank you, trying to maybe personalize it a little bit more. Maybe you're sending a message above and beyond just the thank you. And so no, go ahead. The dynamics of the email threads and the group communication. So this is really important, is being aware of everybody that is copied on the email. So when you're typically sending out an email to a group of folks, obviously you're picking that group of folks for a reason, and you want to make sure that all of them are getting the information or what have you. So and if you've got group discussion that needs to happen, then it is good to use the reply all, but you have to, again, be careful about how you're using that. And then the blind copy component, I know some folks like to use that. You may want to blind copy your supervisor or your leader, what have you, but you need to be very careful about the way that that's used, because particularly if the person that you're blind copying does not realize that you're blind copying them, it can create a really awkward situation if they respond back to that email, especially replying back to all. Then somebody that was not supposed to be in that conversation to begin with is now suddenly in that conversation, and so that can create some awkward moments. So, like, a best practice on that would be, if you really do believe that maybe your one-up needs to be kind of aware of something, then what you might want to do is forward that email to them, you know, individually, and then maybe provide a little bit of context with what's going on. So that way it doesn't set up a situation where maybe they respond back and cause that awkward situation. Avoid sending the partially complete email. I know that can potentially happen to a lot of us. We're all very busy. You start drafting an email, and maybe you send it accidentally before you have finished it, or you start an email, you get up and do something else, you come back, and you're thinking that I got this knocked out. I went ahead and hit the send button, and then realized that it wasn't done. And so again, it's one of those things, though, it comes off as like not professional when that happens. And again, another trick for avoiding that is to not put who the email is addressed to until you've completed the email. So let that be the last thing that you do. You go ahead and write out the email, get it finished, make sure that it says what you want it to, you've proofread it, and then you put their name in and go ahead and send it.
Or the subject line, that works as well.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. Yep. Good deal. Don't babble. I know this is one that's near and dear to my heart, because I tend to do that. You want to make sure that you're not overly wordy. You're trying to be brief and to the point, and make sure that the person understands as quickly as possible what you're trying to say, or what you potentially need from them. So try to make it as succinct as possible. And then also you want to do things that you don't want to do things that make it look unprofessional, like, you know, this note about easy with the exclamation points. It depends on your audience. I think some of the things that we tend to want to do, depending upon how well you know that person. If it's somebody that you work with really closely and you know them very well, then yeah, obviously, then you can stick some emojis and some exclamation points or capitalize things, like that type of thing. But in a really professional email, you want to try to avoid those kinds of things if at all possible. So. This is kind of what we were talking about before, about just taking a moment before you send an email to reread it to make sure that it says exactly what you want it to say, that it comes across as professional, that it's not too emotional. It also, you want to make sure that you've got all the detail in there, because you don't want to have to continue to respond back to that email again and again. Some of the folks on this call will know that sometimes that happens with me, where I'm trying to send information out to everybody, and then occasionally I forget a point and I'm having to follow it up again with another email. It's me, hey, it's me again. So you want to try to avoid that if all possible. And so if you take the time to really read through it and try to make sure that you've got all the information in there. Another good point too, particularly if it's a really critical email and it's going out to a lot of people, you may want to get somebody that like a peer or team member to maybe read through it before you send it out, just to make sure that it conveys the right tone and it contains all the right information. So folks are a lot more likely to respond to you in regard to, like, if you're asking them to do something, if it's really obvious what you're asking them to do. So if I'm reaching out to someone to ask them that, hey, can you please help me with whatever it is that you're asking them for? If I bury that way down at the bottom of a long email, again, they may or may not see that, and not realize that you're asking them to do something. So right from the get-go, it's kind of like the subject line. That you want to make sure that they understand what your ask is right from the beginning. And then, if you need to provide additional detail, you can do that after the fact, but at least they know right from the get-go that you're asking them to do something for you. And then, if applicable, giving a deadline. So this is very similar to what we were just talking about. So if you are asking somebody and you do need something by a specific date, you need to be very clear in regard to what that deadline is. I know this can be kind of tricky. If it's a team member or somebody that you're leading, then obviously they're used to you providing us, a deadline or what have you. And so it's easier for you to just come right and say, hey, look, I need this by tomorrow. If it's a peer or somebody that you're not typically working with, where it's not within your chain of command, then obviously if you're asking for something and for them to deliver it within a certain time frame, you have to be maybe phrase that a little softer and kind of put it out there in a way that is respectfully requesting rather than demanding something be done by a certain time. The copy and paste attachments. So this is one where if possible, it's better to try to put the content of an attachment within the body of the email, because that way you're a lot more likely for the folks to see that information than if you've just got it in there as an attachment. And this is one of those things where you have to kind of be careful about the way that you do that. If you're trying to convey a lot of information, then obviously you're going to have to depend upon those attachments and get those in there and trust that the folks are going to go through and see those attachments. But if there are really important components to this, if you can take those pieces and actually embed them in the body of the email, then if they open that email, they're going to see that information right from the get-go and be able to respond to that. Also, kind of setting those the important things apart, like using white space on either side of your verbiage to kind of call attention to the fact that, hey, this is the important component to this email, is another way that you can kind of make sure that folks are focused on the most important part of the email. And let's see.
And then sending separate
Oh,
emails.
yes.
I'm guilty of not doing this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes, send in separate emails for like unrelated stuff. That you can do that to try to make sure that you're putting it in smaller bites instead of like this one huge email with 14 different attachments or what have you. If you can kind of break it up a little bit, that's more effective as well. So we're going to do a little kind of exercise here to look at a couple of examples of various types of emails and just kind of looking at what the better way would be. So here's an initial example. So the subject line following up after Thursday's meeting. Hello everybody. Those able to for unable to attend. Contact Joan for the relevant information. Additional emails are forthcoming. So there's one example. And then on the other hand, another example of like a very similar email would be this one. So in the subject line, you have additional details from strategy meeting. So right from the get-go, you can look at the subject line and say, okay, I had like half a dozen meetings on Thursday. So I'm not even sure which meeting we're talking about in this first example versus this one calls out, the second example calls out the strategy meeting. You can kind of see from here about that within the body of the email, they're much more specific in regard to the components here. They've attached the notes associated with the meeting and a lot more, get into a lot more detail and more specific in regard to the information. It's a lot more informative. This next example, again, the subject line, quick question. The verbiage there about, hey, I've been a fan of yours for years, love to pick your brain. I don't know about you. If I got this email, I would be like, not sure exactly what they want. And I don't know if I want to even get into this discussion, depending upon what the topic might be, versus, another example of that here, here, very specific in regard to, hey, I just need a 20-minute call. And here is exactly kind of what I would like to talk to you about. So that then you have a better understanding of exactly what the call is going to be about. And okay, yeah, I can probably schedule that in later today, or I know kind of how much time it's going to take, and I know exactly what we're going to be talking about. So this one, an expense approval, again, so the subject line, ASHE conference, that's not bad. I mean, obviously we know that sort of what the topic's going to be about. But again, as far as the verbiage goes, like, hey, people are already booking hotels. I'd like to go, versus, another example of that would be, request for approval. So right from the get-go, from the subject line, you already know that, like, okay, one of my folks is wanting to go to this thing. And then they're a lot more specific in regard to why they feel like that they should go to, what it can do for them. They've already researched all the information in regard to cost and what have you, and the dates available. So a lot more information associated with this rather than leaving it very ambiguous. All right. So any questions on emails or anything anybody would like to say about emails, and keep it clean? All right. So Conway, take it away.
Sean has his hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that right before this class, I had a one that came in, it just said risk assessment. And it had a name I never even knew, but it's just, I just happened to send a risk assessment to the place next door at MetroView today. And I was like, huh, I was like, somebody's looking for it. It was totally just off the wall. That was the topic, but it got my attention because that's something I deal with.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything with it, but I mean, that can catch your eye. But
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
they try to get you in healthcare with snappy words to try to get you to bite. So,
Yeah. 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 And that was from a vendor.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think
it
I
was
got,
some name.
I think
You
I got
might
the same one. Yes.
I think I did too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're right. It caught my attention. As soon as I saw risk assessment, I was like, I was thinking it was maybe an internal email. And so I popped
Yes,
that one right away. So yeah, you're
that's
right.
what I thought too. I thought it was somebody send me, they need some risk assessments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Sean. Let's jump into, as Chip covered email so very well, let's talk about phone calls, conducting professional phone calls and the use of text appropriately. When we make phone calls in a conversation, we all do it. It's something that we all do and we have to do on a daily basis. So when making a phone call, and it may be an emotionally charged phone call, like someone in maybe one of our team members, mother or parent or someone has passed away, and we get the phone call and we're talking to them. At that time, hearing their voice, we know we can show empathy to them, you know, because no one wants to lose a loved one or anything like that. And in a text or email, you couldn't really convey that. But in a phone call, you can. In phone calls, conversations, you can convey emotions and our tone, our inflection of how we talk. So emotionally, we can be happy in it, and it'll come across that way on the phone. Like if, say, I'll pick on Seth. Say Seth calls me and say, "Hey, Conway, I heard you got a promotion." I can say, "Yeah, good, thank you. Sounds good to me." You know. So if it's something on the opposite side of it, something bad, like someone calls and says, "Hey, I think you got a boiler problem," I can say, "What? What do you mean? Why? What's going on?" So the emotion gets conveyed in that phone call, and not so much in an email, especially if it's something serious. At the same time, with phone calls, if something is very urgent, or the matter is emotionally charged, or someone is upset from a vendor that's calling us, by way of a phone call, we can de-escalate the tone of the conversation by our tone. Like you see, I slowed my speech down so I can say, okay, so let's talk about what the issue is. What is the problem? How can I help? I mean, that can change the whole conversation. If it's up here, we're real high and we want to bring it down, our voice and how we speak to someone can make that change. An apology carries much weight when delivered in person. I know that I have had to do this. Obviously, I'm not perfect like Chip, but I had to make phone calls when I've had to apologize. I may have spoken out of turn, or I've said I was going to do something and I didn't do it. And the best way to do that so that it's genuine is to make a phone call. Call the person, be genuine about it, because we have had people call us or in a situation and they say, "Yeah, I'm sorry." Well, you can tell by their tone that they're not really sorry. So when we want to apologize for something that we have done, or we missed an email, or we missed calling someone back, be apologetic about it, you know, and sound from the heart, because like I just said, if it's not from the heart, it'll come across in how we sound. Phone call is a more efficient way to address multiple questions and explanations. I really appreciate this one, this part of our slide, because for me, phone calls allow me to get immediate clarification. Chip just went over emails, and you can put a lot into an email, but for me personally, I get more out of a phone conversation with someone than I will with an email sometimes. It helps me to ask questions, to ask clarifying questions, for them to ask me questions. It helps me to explain the subject matter. I may be clear on one side of the conversation, but I'll be like, Justin, I didn't understand what you said on this. Can you clarify this? So sometimes in a professional situation in leadership, we do need to have a phone call so that we can have clarifying questions answered. So it's a very important thing to have that type of phone call conversation. When a significant amount of time has passed, a phone call can reestablish connection. I agree with this also. We are all very busy. We may receive emails and put a exclamation point in our inbox to go back to it, and time will go by. I know when I first came into this role, leadership role, the inundated amount of emails that came to me was kind of overwhelming because they kept coming. And I'd have to mark and put a folder and put it over here to go back to it. But using the phone to call that person and have that conversation really helped me to pick up where the email left off. So I can ask, is there any dates that have changed? Or any thing that I need to do differently? Are there any misunderstandings? We can talk about it. In that period of time that has passed, things have changed. We know things change very quickly every day. So a phone call can ensure a message is delivered immediately and we get the response that we need in real time. Sometimes for us, things happen in real time and we need to call somebody. We don't need a text, we don't need email, we need to talk to someone. And so we want to make sure we use it appropriately. And catching up, time has passed, making sure we bring everything up to speed. And also, as the last paragraph down at the bottom says, for especially important messages, a phone call emphasizes the information's significance, ensuring it is understood and prioritized appropriately. And that is very, very important in the times that we live in our time frame of work. Here's one thing that a lot of people may not think to do, but it's probably a good thing to try to do. And it's to write down the topics that we want to talk about on a phone call. It's important that we do that from time to time, especially if we got a heavy conversation that we need to have and we want to make sure we make all the necessary dots and connections. We want to make sure that we stay important, all the important points are hit, discussed, and we have an outcome or an action item that needs to follow up. So writing them down is really beneficial. You can put it on, we all have sticky notes and pads and things like that. So have it out in front of us, in front of yourselves as you're talking on the phone, and you just kind of check it off like a bullet point, check it off. I did this, I covered this. All right, I'm good here. And that way, you don't miss it. And also have a list of questions that you may want to ask for a specific topic or discussion. Write it down so you don't miss. So I know I've done that myself when I didn't write it down. We have the conversation, I hang up, and I go, I should have asked her this, or I should have asked him that. But if I had written it down and had it in front of me, I might not have had that outcome. So I have to call him back. So it's important to sometimes just write it down before we make a phone call. Initiate the phone call in a friendly greeting. This is really, really important. A friendly greeting is setting the positive tone for the conversation that is to be had. One thing that I'll say that I really is a pet peeve of mine is I pick up, someone calls me and they just start talking to me. Conway, I need you to do such and such, such. No greeting, no hello. No, it's a noise, a mess out of me. That may just be me, not you. But in a professional setting, you at least say hello to the person. Hey, how you doing? Depending on your rapport that you have with them, you may say, hey man, how you doing? Good, all right. And then go right into what you need to talk about. But it helps the other person understand who they are speaking to and why you're calling them. Explain, state why you're calling instead of just going into what you may need or they may need. So it's good to have that friendly phone etiquette. Clearly explain the purpose of your call early in the conversation. It's really key that we do that because we need to be respectful of everyone's time. And getting on a phone call and rambling about something that's irrelevant, only to say the person says, well, I really got to go. And then you go into the main purpose of your call. As the example says, I'm calling to discuss the project updates and address any questions that you might have. Get right into it after your friendly greeting. We don't want to skip the friendly greeting part. We still need to do the friendly greeting, express who we are, and then go into the meat of our phone call. The last paragraph, you're good. Regulate and be mindful. You can go back. Regulate and be mindful of your tone and active listening. A calm and understanding tone helps de-escalate tension. And from time to time, we may get a nurse manager or someone like that call us and they're upset. The call, like for example, today, perfect example, just a few minutes before we got on, I had a nurse manager call me, Conway, the call bells keep ringing on this side. It's supposed to ring upstairs on 3rd floor. Now, I could have responded back and matched her tone, but that would not have been professional. So I kept the tone low, calm, respectful. And as we were speaking, you could tell her voice changed, her demeanor changed to be, now we can have a good professional conversation. So it's good to maintain a professional tone throughout the calls, even if it's an escalated phone call or just even a phone call, a general conversation. Acknowledge disruptions and interferences. This happens from most of the plant engineering guys that are out and about throughout the facility. I know it has happened to me a couple of times when I'm on the phone, and when we were going over this, that Chip may call me and I'm on the phone and I'm walking into the boiler room, and everyone knows the boiler room is loud and noisy, and I'm saying, I'm still, yeah, I can hear it. Yeah, keep going. You're doing the ear to the shoulder thing, and we don't want to really do that. We want to acknowledge that there's a disruption going on, and then be politely say, well, let me step out of the room, or hold on for 1 second so I can hear you better. Or as the example says, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? There was some background noise and I missed what you said. Because we don't want to act like we're listening to them, and we really aren't, because they may ask us a question and you say yes, and you're saying yes to something that you really don't want to say yes to, or you're just going along with the conversation. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I got some noise behind me. Let me step away, and then let's continue our conversation. Close strong. We want to recap the conversation on the phone. A lot of things can be said on the phone. As we stated earlier, we're all busy. For myself, I could be on the phone with Matt talking about something. As soon as I hang up, I'm inundated with vendors asking me questions. So I could easily, not on purpose, forget some of that conversation. So it's good to summarize the point, recap what you finalized, and it just kind of sticks in your head a little better. And even go a step further. And when you get the opportunity to get back to your computer, follow up with an email to summarize the conversation, to make sure you didn't miss anything in the conversation, and make sure you have full clarity in the conversation and any action items that may have been missed because of noise, distractions, or people coming up to you. So we want to make sure when we finish the conversation, everyone's on the same page and we know what the next steps are. Voicemail is a last-ditch effort to reach someone. So I love this percentage. It says up to 80% of phone calls, up to 80% of callers don't leave voicemails because they assume that their messages will not be heard. And I am guilty of that. Outside of the work environment with my family and friends, unless it's very, very important, I don't leave voicemails because I know a lot of people aren't going to listen to them. So I fall into that 80%. The slide does say, consider following up with a voicemail with an email. Now, however, lengthy messages lead to confusion and disconnect. So we don't want to read a book to somebody in a voicemail. They're not going to listen. It's going to be, especially if you get known for doing that, they're definitely not going to listen. So we want to make sure that we are conscious of what we're doing and how we are communicating, even by voicemail. But if you must, keep it brief and direct in the voicemail. Sometimes it's even helpful to write down the critical details before calling someone, so you know you can be precise and concise in your voicemail of what you're trying to convey in that brief snippet of a phone call. I appreciate the slide says include a friendly professional greeting and identify yourself. Monitor your tone, your word choice, and enunciation. So even in that short period of time, it says be brief, but we can accomplish all those things in a short amount of time and get the information across. So let's do this brief example. Voicemail, returning of missed call. You could do better, but if you were to say, hey, I got your message. What do we think about that? That's not really saying anything. Or I don't know what happened to the invoice you called about. I might need a little more time. But I'll find it and get back to you. It's a voicemail, but we could have said, hello, this is Jane Smith from Novant Health Plan Engineering. Totally different than, hey, I got your message. I'm not saying anything, but, or we could say when talking about the invoice, I am calling to speak to Jane Smith regarding an invoice dated on June 10th, 2023. Totally different voicemail. When they hear that, then they'll say, oh, I know what they're calling for, or I know who to call and talk and ask for. So it's really important that we kind of leave a voicemail, but leave it with concise information. Texts are really personal and really urgent messages. I know all of us, when we have our corporate environmental care meetings, you know, we're in the room and we're paying attention to what someone may be saying and listening. But texting, as it says in the paragraph, texting is more appropriate when you have established friendly relationships with the recipient. Like if me and Seth are talking, I may sit next to him, I'm gonna say, hey man, what do you think your dad's gonna say about this? You know, because we have that rapport. But in a professional environment, you may want to ask if the other party is willing to receive text messages from you. You know, they may want to receive emails from you, or they may want to receive a phone call. So text messages can be used to have their place, but we don't want to misuse it or jump to a conclusion that everyone texts and everyone feels comfortable with that. So we want to be careful of how we do that. The last part of this, the paragraph, text messages can easily be misinterpreted due to the lack of tone and context. So we want to avoid discussing emotionally charged or sensitive things by way of text. That may be more of a phone call, you know, if it's something that we need to, something that's emotionally involved, because you can't deliver that by way of text. And probably the ear needs to hear the voice. Texting suits casual and informal conversations such as quick updates. And that's kind of basically what I use texting for, you know, for quick updates, short answers, check-ins, how things are going, a quick question. That's what I would say texting is good for. Second paragraph, it says, when you cannot make or take a phone call, texting provides a quick, efficient way to communicate, which is true. But for urgent situations requiring immediate attention, or quick texting is more effective than an email or waiting for a phone call. So it depends on the situation. Sometimes we need to call to hear a voice, to hear the urgency of the matter. Or sometimes we can say, call me by way of text. You say, call me ASAP. So we can use texting in a professional environment, but we need to know how to use it in the right way. Deciding if a meeting is needed or not. Chip.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, I don't know. Do we want to shoot for a break here?
Now would be a good time.
Okay. All right. So, we want to shoot for what? 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Can we do it in 5?
Okay. Yep. Let's everybody shoot for 5 minutes then. So I think we got 3:05 right now, so be back by 3:10. Thanks. Okay. Got 3:10. See number of folks starting to pop back in here.
John had to drop off for another obligation. So he said he'll see us in a couple weeks.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, then let's get started back. So our next objective is deciding if a meeting is needed or not. So, I don't know if how many may have seen this before, but these are some of the things that that you see a lot of times in meetings, particularly when when we've done Zoom meetings or what have you. So it's fun to almost like, match up which of these things happen during a meeting. It's particularly if somebody's on mute. That always happens just about every single time in a meeting, and so you can pretty much in most meetings you can pretty much fill up this bingo card. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, when the meeting is not necessarily critical, or maybe even a meeting that shouldn't take place, I think a lot of people do entertain themselves with this kind of stuff because obviously the content is not what it needs to be. So, so to get down to it, so when is a meeting appropriate? Instead of like an email or a call or a text or what have you. And so, what do you guys think? When should we have a meeting rather than me like sending, or me or whoever, or you or whoever sending an email or picking up the phone and calling somebody?
Guess they don't want any meetings, Chip.
Sean has his hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
So I know you were here yesterday, I believe, or the day before.
Yep.
You saw that catastrophe at HVI with the fire alarm. So we're getting together with, there was a email from Johnny on the Kip, about whether that needs to be an evacuated building or not. So we're going to have a big meeting about it with multiple people, because it's not just an email situation. That's a lot of more people need to be involved, and it needs to be. I'm kind of like, I think me and you, Chip, I'm not a huge email. I like to talk, because I think some things can get lost in translation on emails, especially something as vital as that. So yeah, it quickly went from two emails to, hey, let's plan a meeting. We're going to have
Yep.
a meeting with multiple people. So in person.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. That's a great example. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, so yeah, definitely if it's a complex issue, or maybe a process discussion that involves like multiple groups or people, then and needing to have that sort of immediate feedback, and being able to talk through a process, those are the kinds of things that where a meeting is really, you really can't do it any other way. So so we've got some bullets here that the pretty good indications in regard to what would need to generate a meeting. So number one, could you achieve the objective of the meeting via a different way? So in Sean's example, no. I mean, there's too many people involved, and too much to be able to discuss to be able to handle that in any other way. Another good point here is, like, are the decision makers able to attend the meeting? So if, again, in Sean's case there, so if we're talking about whether we're going to potentially evacuate this building when a fire alarm goes off or not, then basically the folks that need to be involved with making that decision need to be at the meeting, because we can talk about it all day long, but if the decision maker's not there, then it's just wasted time. And again, is there enough information available? So this is one of the things that will really frustrate senior leaders or what have you, if basically you've pulled together this meeting to talk about whatever this issue happens to be, and then you don't have the information that's needed to be able to make a good decision. Again, that's just basically a waste of time. Is the matter significant, emotionally charged, or sensitive? So, yeah, if we've got some sort of an issue maybe between multiple people that you're having to work through, you as a leader on the team, you've got some folks within your team that are not getting along, they've got some sort of an issue going on there, then obviously that's not something that you're going to be able to do with a phone call or an email. You've got to be able to pull those folks together and be able to kind of talk through whatever the issue is. And then, also from a timeliness standpoint, you need to ask your question, hey, is this something that needs to be dealt with immediately? I really don't have time to pull everybody together into a meeting. By the time we're able to get it scheduled and on everybody's calendar, it's going to be next week. And this is something that needs to be handled now. So in some cases, the time frame may demand a different way to pursue it instead of having a meeting. So when we do decide to have a meeting, then there needs to be documents that are associated with meetings, especially when we have meetings that are set up to be like standing meetings, meetings that are for a specific purpose, or even if they're impromptu meetings. In a lot of cases, we need to make sure that we've got documents like an agenda, particularly if it is an impromptu meeting and folks are not exactly sure what we're talking about. I mean, there may be a subject, but it definitely helps to go ahead and have an agenda to like, here are the bullets that we need to kind of discuss as part of this, so that folks can kind of prepare and be ready to talk about that. There may be other components that we need to also supply as far as that. So what is our again, like using Sean's example there. So what is our policy associated with like fire alarms in a building like the HVI building, and what are the things that we're supposed to do in those cases, and so we need to kind of make sure that everybody's aware of that. So there's a lot of and then if the meeting again, if it's a standing type of meeting where there is where we may be presenting some things, then there may be reports or graphs or other charts, that kind of stuff that we need to include as part of that meeting prep. Distributing the documents effectively, that we've got, and also understanding what the audience preference is for this. So how we get these documents out to folks. I mean, we've got a lot of different options now in the way that we do this. We have team sites and SharePoint sites and shared drives, and we can include the materials on emails. We can present them, if we're in an in-person room, we can present them electronically with a projector. We've got a lot of different options, and so you have to kind of know sort of who is the audience for this, and what is potentially the preference in the way that we're going to present these. And then we talked about the different ways to get that out, and then making sure that everybody has access to those sites if we do use those sites. Professional memorandums. So in a lot of cases, like you want to look at the different ways that you do communicate out. A memo, professional memo is one of the ways that we do it. I think I know a lot of you have probably seen those come out, particularly like from some of our EVP leadership when we are bringing on new people within the organization, or potentially if people are leaving the organization. A lot of times those kind of notifications come out in a memo, or like big initiatives that come out in a lot of cases, where we're doing things with mergers and acquisitions or things like that. In a lot of cases, you see those kinds of things communicated in a memo. We do also have other means to communicate stuff out, 4Ps, SBARs, some of that kind of stuff. But in any of those professional communications, we want to make sure that the way that we're doing that, we start with a clear purpose. You know, why are we sending this out to begin with? And we make sure that we're, again, being very concise in the way that we communicate that information. We don't want to babble and clog it up with a lot of stuff that's not necessary. The professional tone, like we've already talked about. The subject line, similar to what we talked about on the email, very important there to make sure that, again, that we're conveying the message as succinctly as possible, providing the context and the specific details so that folks know sort of why are we talking about this now. And then again, that proofreading component is especially important here. Email is one thing, and you can potentially get by with a mistake here or there in an email. But if we're putting out a professional memo out to the organization or out to the facility that you're at or whatever, then it really needs to be accurate and without error. So here are some of the components to a memo. I think, you know, many of you have probably written memos in the past. There are a number of different memo formats, some of these that you can pull up in Word or what have you, but these are the specific components to it. So we talked about the title, making sure that we're clear and concise on that, the heading in regard to who is this to and who is it from. The introduction. So we want to make sure that we're getting the scope of what we're talking about out there, providing the background information on it. We want to put, kind of summarize it, give that overview, a timeline associated with that, and then a closing for the memo. So policies and procedures are another type of documentation that we get involved in a lot. A number of you that sit in on, particularly on some of the environment of care committee meetings that are either the corporate environment of care committee or even your individual facility environment of care committees. In a lot of cases, you're talking about policy and procedure. We establish policy and procedure to make sure that we're being consistent in the way that we're doing things. So that we're not just from place to place, we're not doing things completely differently. Particularly in a large company like Novant, it becomes even more critical to make sure that we've got good policy and procedure that follows us no matter where we go. When we're drafting those policies, we want to make sure that we determine the scope of the policy, like who all's included as part of this policy. Using examples to illustrate how we're going to apply this. We want to make sure that it's reviewed and that we seek input in regard to both the initial writing of the policy and any sort of updates that we do for the policies. And then we want to make sure that it's maintained in a shared location so that it's really easy for everybody to access. One benefit that we have is the document manager software that we use is a common place that everybody can access. So that's where all of our policies and procedures are housed. And then we have a very specific format in regard to how the policies are written. So that would help, if you're writing a policy for the first time, that would really help sort of point you in the right direction. There's a template associated with how that policy needs to be written. And then, so sticking to the policy making system. So, again, we want to make sure that we keep the target audience in mind when we're developing that. So as you're kind of thinking them through sort of the step-by-step, the procedure associated with this policy, who is it that this is really targeted at? So who are the people that are going to need to follow this procedure? And so number one, are we getting input from them, and is it really written in such a way that they will be able to follow it? We want to prioritize the policies that need to be written and implemented. So in some cases, we have practices that are done that maybe some of those things are not quite as critical. we kind of determine, yeah, hey, this is sort of a best practice. It doesn't necessarily need to be a policy though. When we do write a policy, we want to make sure that we research it and make sure that we are that we're accurate in the way that we're describing some of this stuff. So if we're writing a policy that is going to be in conjunction with specific codes and regulations that are out there, we want to make sure that we are referencing all the correct codes and references for the policy and potentially reference them in the policy document. We want to write an initial draft, make sure that the procedures that we put in there are accurate. We send the draft for review and final approval. Again, this is where our process, the Novant process for this, helps a lot, because as we develop these policies, typically, I'll use the environment of care example again. Those policies route through those committees. So in a lot of cases, they're being reviewed and approved by those committees. So a lot of folks get a chance to see those, ask questions, potentially amend those policies if we need to add something to them. And then as part of the policy posting process, they are posted for comment for a period of time. So it goes out to the whole organization. So if there is something that's missing, or there's something that's maybe not clear and there's a question, folks have an opportunity just to provide that feedback so that you can modify those and make sure that the policy is accurate as it can be. And then also as part of that process, then those policies are distributed and implemented. I think a lot of us get those emails where they present policy update or what's new emails in regard to policies that are new to the organization. So executive summaries. So an executive summary in a lot of cases are things that we utilize when we're presenting at meetings that typically include maybe senior leaders or executive leaders, where we may be a good example of this is like board reports. So again, from an EOC standpoint, we want to provide the information that's associated with our programs, with our environment of care programs. Obviously, we don't want to go into all the detail that's associated with all of those programs. We would look at giving them a summary of the activities that have taken place throughout the year and the things that we feel like are probably the most important and they need to know. Obviously, or not obviously, but another example is on projects. I know some of the larger projects that go to the board are put in like an executive summary format. They typically include business plans. So on some of these, as we would do an executive summary, you would recap the business plan that's associated with it. Any sort of research that took place, you would want to have some of that information associated with it. And then making sure that you've got the business plan, that you're talking through the business plan with those decision makers, and then communicating the ideas and the changes with management, colleagues, or consumers are associated with that. But with all of that detail that goes into these things, you really want to try to cap it at about 10% of that information as part of the executive summary. So again, with the audience that is associated with this, it's typically those senior leaders, and they want to know kind of what the nub of the matter is. They appreciate all the research that went into it, but they don't necessarily have the time to go through all of that. And so that executive summary of what is going on is critical, particularly when we're looking for them to make a decision. So here's some typical components to an executive summary. The introduction, basically talking about what the problem is or what the document is trying to solve. The body of the summary, outlining the project outcomes and the including the performance metrics, and then the conclusion is in regard to what lessons are learned, the recommendations, and the importance of the work. Again, this is one of those things where we have specific formats for this kind of information. So typically, if you're going to be involved with providing an executive summary at some meeting, we're going to have a template that you would use to be able to provide that information. So that would help tremendously in regard to the sort of directing you into what pieces of information need to be included as part of that executive summary. So as far as like do's and don'ts with the an executive summary, we want to this kind of goes to what I was just talking about. Check for previously prepared reports for style and style guidance and consistency. So that template that I was just talking about. There are also previous, if you look on iConnect, there not only can you find the templates, but there are also usually previous executive summaries that you can kind of use as examples. Using headings and subheadings to draw attention to the most important information. Again, you're wanting to try to get the most critical components to your audience as quickly as possible. So lining those out, those separate important points out under specific headings is a good way to do that, calling attention to them that way. Statistics and figures and charts and graphs and what have you are really good to put into these because it conveys a lot of information in a very compact way. So if you're trying to make your point on something, using that type of information is a good way to do that, particularly since a lot of those leaders are used to getting information in that type of format. That they kind of will go directly to that information and look at it. And again, sort of like what we were talking about with emails, using the white space to kind of separate that important component in the executive summary is a good way to call attention to it and make sure that they see that piece. So some of the things that we don't want to do is we want to make sure that we're being very clear in our communication. So if we're using a lot of jargon or abbreviations or something like that, that somebody may not understand, then the message is going to get lost and the communication is going to fail. So hopeful recommendations, we don't want to so hopefully we can do this or whatever like that. We need to be very clear as to what we're recommending and not just kind of, wishful thinking. This is what needs to happen and we need a decision on this. Making sure that the information that we have in there is all the important information to whatever it is that we're trying to convey. There may be a lot of other information associated with this topic, but it may not be relevant to exactly what the decision that we're trying to get from our audience. And then, the copied and pasted contents from lengthier documents. Again, this is one kind of goes to the previous bullet where it may not all be relevant. If we've copied in this very large document, we're going to lose people. They're not going to necessarily be able to read through all of that stuff. So we need to highlight the important pieces of that and not have these huge documents associated with that. So I spoke earlier about the 4P communications. I think a lot of you have probably seen this before. This is the preferred method within Novant Health to communicate process change. So we're going through, so if I am making some sort of process change across the organization, I want to describe the purpose. So why are we making a change to begin with? The picture, so once we do make the change, what is this going to look like? The plan, so how do we get from where we are now to where we want to be? So we're outlining exactly what needs to happen to make that take place. And then the part is basically outlining the roles of the people that are associated with this. How, not only here is our plan, but here's your part in how to make this plan work. So I think we have an example here. So this is one that we did a while back. So we had a process change in regard to the type of basically these relocatable power taps or outlet strips that could be used within like the operating rooms. And so so we did a 4-piece basically saying that there are only specific types that can be used, and we've got to change to that. But this was a regulatory issue, and so you can kind of see it was driven by the safety of the patients and the team members within the space. The picture of what it will look like, we kind of went through with bullets to say, you know, that staff will see labels associated with this. The power strips in the OR will be permanently mounted to equipment at all times. The power strips that are going to be used can't be piggybacked or daisy chained as we use them. And basically kind of went on throughout the rest of this to sort of describe sort of the reasons why and what would happen, what's going to happen in the future to change that. And then as far as the part component goes, we kind of outlined what the team members working within those spaces would need to do. So they would need to look for these labels to make sure that we're plugging in the correct load into these. If the combined amperage that we're plugging into the strips is greater than what that power strip is rated for, then we needed to make sure that we plug them in somewhere else. And then we needed to make sure that it remained plugged into the power strip. And if it didn't, if we had a power strip that did not have equipment plugged into it, it should be removed and stored somewhere else. We did not need to have those just like sitting around. So we kind of made it clear to the team members in that space exactly what they needed to do as part of this process. So we also talked about the S-bar or S-bar Q as it's known, and so the role for that communication is a little bit different. For an S-bar, what we're looking for there is a decision to be able to communicate information, and so that we can make a decision on a change or something that we're doing. So so one of the ways that we use an S-bar is when we submit for capital. So as we try to get approval for the capital, so if we submit for a specific project, then we're describing the situation and the background and the assessment that we've done and the recommendation that we're making as part of that process. So those are the components that the S-bar stands for. So we're describing the situation. So say that we're replacing an air handling unit that serves an OR. So the situation is the air handling unit that serves that OR is failing and is unable to meet the operational parameters that we need for that OR room. The background is that this air handling unit is 50 years old. It is well beyond its life. We have maintained it the best that we can, but it just currently is no longer able to meet the needs for this area. We went through and did an assessment of this air handling unit and determined that there is no way for us to continue to repair it. There are some structural components that are falling apart on this. And pretty much as we've gone through this, we've determined based on this assessment that our recommendation is that we will need to replace this air handling unit. And it's obviously going to cost us a good bit of money on that and time and effort. But our recommendation at this point is the direction that we need to go. So that would be an example of how we would use an S-bar to support a capital request. There's a lot of other situations that we would use this in, maybe getting us to a recommendation that we make a process change. So we would we would use an S-bar to come to the decision that we need to make a change, and then we would potentially use a 4P to communicate what that change is, process change associated with that. So that's in regard to the meetings. So does anybody have any questions about when we would use a meeting and the documents that we would use to support those meetings? All right. Well, then we'll move to Learning Objective 5, and Conway, let you take it.
So let's go into objective 5. We're going to do a group discussion before as we get started. What are some common challenges or barriers to professional communication? What are some, that's for anybody. What are some common challenges or barriers when it comes to communication? You can talk out loud or raise your
Wait,
hand.
I know for us, being non-clinical, trying to explain what a chiller does or what X amount of equipment does to somebody that's a nurse is practically impossible.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a great example. Anyone else? Let's get one more. One more. What else? A barrier.
So it can go the other way too, right? So we're like, it's difficult for us to describe some of the technical things that we do to the folks that we need to communicate out to, but at the same time, communication coming back to us a lot of times, if there's a clinical issue, we may struggle to understand, what that clinical issue is. And so that may hamper our efforts to help support that clinical staff when we don't necessarily understand the need that they have or what's going on. So yeah, so it can definitely go both ways. Brian, I see Brian's got his hand up too.
Yeah, kind of in the same vein as what you just said, Chip. Regulatory versus trying to, I think, I drew a blank on his name he was up in Winston. He did the last class. Ken, he said, the
Yep.
get her done mentality. Now we have to stop, kind of go through a regulatory process. Maybe we had to put up a barrier to protect the patients for infection control and whatnot. So just having some knowledge to communicate, what the procedure may be,
Yeah,
could be a barrier.
yeah, that's a great point. If there are folks within the facility that don't understand some of the things that we're why we may need to put up so we've got I know we've had a sewer line repair that's been going on at Rowan, and so from an ICRA standpoint, we potentially have to put up ICRA barriers and do all that kind of stuff, and so making sure that folks understand the need for some of that stuff. Well, hey, why are you blocking off this hallway? Why can't we get through here? That type of thing. So yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for sharing those thoughts. Let's jump right into it. I really appreciate this part of our discussion because we're going to be talking about things that we probably don't even really, it happens or we do it ourselves and we don't even realize it. So we're going to kind of bring some awareness to our body language and nonverbal and verbal barriers that we may be creating ourselves, or in part of our conversations, we may notice it and it could cause a barrier. So awareness and efforts to mitigate these obstacles are necessary for achieving clear, meaningful communication. So that's what the next couple of slides that I'm going to cover is really going to help us to be aware of it, whether we're doing it ourselves or someone else is doing it, and how to mitigate it to we can have a meaningful conversation. So all communication has a sender and a receiver.
Did we lose you, Conway?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I can't see you guys. Okay.
We're here.
Oh, you're here?
Yeah, they're there. I can see them.
You see
There
me,
you
but
see you.
I can't see y'all. I can't see the presentation. All righty. Where'd y'all go? Hold on. All right. There you go. Got it. I don't know what happened. All communication has a sender and a receiver. So on the sender side, obviously, self-explanatory, we're sending out information, we're initiating a conversation, whether it be by words or a text or pictures or something, we are initiating sending out that information. The receiver has to take that information and decode it almost, we use that word, or interpret it to understand what we're trying to convey. So it really, in communication, that's really what it is, right? If we are married or have family members and you're talking to your spouse, that's communication. Someone's talking, someone's receiving, back and forth. Same thing in the professional environment and leadership. How we communicate is very important. We have to know how we're doing it, what we're saying, and also our body language, nonverbal and verbal, when it comes to communication. Like we mentioned, some of the tips that we can use for the we that are sending out information: give thought to what you're getting ready to say, whether it be by phone, text, or email. Give thought about, think about what we're going to say or speak. You know, that adjective, you know, speak, think before you speak. Same thing when it comes to a professional environment. And be confident in what you're speaking about. For us that are receiving information, someone's telling us something, ask clarifying questions. Parrot the question, the information. Did I hear you correctly? Did you say I need to do this first, then secondly do this, and then third do this? Practice active listening. You know, we want to make sure that we're engaged in the conversation so we can hear and take in the important information that's being relayed to us. Nonverbal communication often speaks louder than words. I really appreciate this too. Look at this number. 55% of nonverbal communication is body language. 38% is voice and 7% is words. So with that in thought and mind, what do you think most people see? What do you think most people hear or see when we're having communication with somebody? Is it me doing like this and doing this, or, you know, or is it what I'm saying? Or was it what I sent in an email? Next slide. It's more so the body language. Nonverbal can have various roles in the workplace environment. You know, we can, nonverbal, again, we talked about this in my very first section, is our body language, our actions, our hands, our movements, our facial expressions. And we're going to go into more detail on that in a few minutes. But those nonverbal things can contradict what we're saying. It can substitute what we're saying. It could either complement what we're saying, or it can underline, give us some support of what we may be saying. For example, if you are saying that you work very well, I'm a hard worker, you say you send it to me as your one-up. You said, I work very hard, and I think I'll do a great job in this new role. But you're always late for work, or you take long breaks. So your actions are contradicting what you're saying. So our nonverbal, so a lot of times, is even more powerful and it stands out. It's more clearly seen than what we may have written or what we may say. Novant Health does required surveys for patients, and out of 21 questions, 2/3, almost all of it, is questions about nonverbal communication. As you see in the picture, you see the nurse maybe asking the patient, you know, and her body language, you know, use of her hands and their gestures. It's comforting. You know, the gentleman is smiling and engaged in the conversation. So again, nonverbal communication is very important, even when dealing with patients. Inconsistent behavior, verbal and nonverbal. You know, if we're going down the hallway, and I'm sure all of us have seen this at some point in time, you know, say, good morning, how you doing? They're fine, I'm good. It doesn't match up, right? There's a disconnect. Creates a disconnect for us because you look back and like, okay, that is what they said and how their body language was did not match up. So it's good if we can be genuine in our facial expressions and reinforce the message that we're saying. A lot of times gestures can come across different ways. As you see in the picture, you know, the woman in the picture has the 2 thumbs up. Some countries, 2 thumbs up may be offensive. So we have to be aware and sensitivity of cultural differences, nonverbal communication, to avoid misunderstandings or being offensive to someone. Using open, welcome body language. This is one thing that we see a lot. In the next couple of slides, they kind of all roll up into one. We want to avoid gestures like rolling our eyes. So rolling our eyes, that's just a general, across the board sign of disrespect or frustration, or I'm not listening to you. We all know that. And in the work environment, it means the same thing. It means the same thing. And it says, as we see it on the bullet points, crossing arms can be perceived as defensive. If a person does not feel the same way as you, or you might, as you're talking. They might signal that they are unwilling or resistant to participate in the conversation. Have you ever seen it? We're in a group of people and someone's sitting like this and they're down like that, their heads are down. As the last bullet point says, it could also mean they are cold or relaxed or in deep thought. So we can't jump to conclusions when we see certain things. You know, we have to be conscious of that. Nonverbal communication types. We talked about this a little bit, and we're going to go in detail specifically on these topics of facial expressions, eye contact, body language, and physical and digital, and what that looks like. We can go to the next one. A smile. You know, a smile is typically a good thing, right? Usually when we see a smile, we say, okay, that person's happy. You know, it's approachable. I feel comfortable talking to that person. And the smile also supports confidence. You know, the person is confident in what they're saying. It shows that they're engaged in what's being talked about. However, a frown, on the other hand, shows displeasure, frustration, disapproval, like something's wrong, and as you're talking to them. And sometimes a frown, now here's the opposite side of the frown. It could be they're just in deep thought. Some people, and I know one of my friends is like that. When I do public speaking for other things and I'm talking, and I look at him, he always has a frown on his face. Every single time. So I don't even look at him though. But I have asked him, you know, what did I say wrong? He goes, oh no, it was great. You did a good job. And I said, but you were frowning the whole, I was just meditating on what you were saying. So many people have facial expressions that may throw us off. So they could mean different things. So again, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but we want to be aware of. What about a raised eyebrow? What does that mean? A lot of times a raised eyebrow means something is shocking, you know, something that they heard something that they weren't expecting. Or the expression could also indicate confusion or lack of understanding. It signifies that a person might need clarification on something. So when we are speaking to someone and we see this body language, that nonverbal, and we see someone raise their eyebrow like, I don't know about that, you know, we may want to think about what we're saying. Not saying that we're saying is wrong, but we want to think about how that person may have is receiving that information. So we want to keep eye on nonverbal reactions of people while we're speaking to them or interacting with them. Now, we had some hard things, show hands crossed, eyebrows, frowning, smiling. But what about someone has a neutral expression? They're not showing any emotion. Well, it could suggest that a person is in control of their emotions and they're focused on the discussion. A neutral expression can also indicate that a person is open-minded or unbiased. As the young woman in the picture, she looks like she has a natural expression of intent of listening to the person speaking to her. So we just need to be aware of different expressions that people have, natural expressions. Here's one. Maintaining eye contact. So it shows that a person is paying attention, is interested in the conversation as you are talking to them. And you're keeping a rapport of the conversation. And good eye contact can also demonstrate confidence and sincerity. However, on the opposite side of that, if we're staring at someone too long, it makes the other person feel uncomfortable. Or it may give off a feeling of that you're being aggressive to them. So I do like the point in the bottom. Aim to make eye contact about 30% of the time while you're speaking, while speaking, and it makes 70% while listening. It's a really good kind of baseline to go on, so you don't make the other person feel uncomfortable. Avoid eye contact can be interpreted as disinterest. I find this very, in growing up, from my environment of growing up, when you're talking to someone and they are not really focusing on what you're saying, or looking down, looking away, it gives me a sense of that person is not trustworthy, or they feel like they're not paying attention to me, or they're dishonest. So we have to notice these things. You know, if you see that, then you may want to adjust how your conversation is going. You know, try to say something to get their attention. So we want to pay close attention to that. Here's one that I do appreciate, though, as a speaker doing public speaking. Nodding while maintaining eye contact is a very powerful nonverbal cue. It helps the speaker to know that you are listening or engaged in what they're saying. And it gives them the support to say, okay, keep going. You're doing good. Keep going. So we as leaders can do that for each other. Like when Chip was talking earlier, I was listening, obviously, to what he was saying, but I was in agreement with what he was saying. Just a nod to say, yeah, Chip, you're right. That is a good point. So nodding is a very good sign to let the other person know you're engaged and you support what they're saying. Good posture signals engagement and interest in the conversation. Standing and sitting up straight back shows confidence and authority. As you see in the picture, the woman is standing, or I guess she may be standing. Slouching and slumping over in a seat can indicate disinterest or boredom or lack of interest. Or poor posture can also be interpreted as lack of confidence. Again, these are just things that we're bringing to your attention as you're maybe in a leadership role and you're in a meeting and you see this posture or this nonverbal communication. Look for things of how you can adjust your way you're talking to them or how you're engaging with them so that you can gain back their attention. Using hand gestures while speaking can convey enthusiasm and help emphasize key points. I know for me, I use my hands a lot when I'm talking, so I have to gauge how much I use them. It can be a good thing, as shown as a slide presents. Appropriate hand gestures can also clarify, illustrate complex ideas, or make the message more understandable. Mirroring the body language of a person you speak with indicates empathy and agreement. This technique can help build trust and rapport. And I want to add to this that too many gestures can take away from what you're saying, because now it's a distraction. If I'm talking and I keep going like this and I'm saying, you know what I mean? And then you're kind of doing like this to see me. So we want to be careful. Gestures have their place and we want to use them appropriately. Close proximity, especially when not welcome. So this one is one, I'm sure all of us have been in this situation when someone is invading your space and they're too close to you and they're making you feel uncomfortable. So we want to be mindful of ourselves, excuse me, and be respectful of personal boundaries. Is important to maintain a positive interaction. If someone is too close to you, you keep backing up as they get closer. The communication is thrown off because you're trying to dodge them or back away from them. So we want to be mindful of our distance and having a conversation one-on-one with someone. Also, the other thing that we want to make mention of, and as you see on your screen, is fidgeting and tapping and nervousness, anxiety. These are behaviors that can distract others also. You have someone sitting at a table, has a pencil, tapping a pencil or something, that can be distracting. So we want to take note of that too. Maybe we can make an adjustments in what we're saying or how we're saying it. Also, the last paragraph, such suggestions, the ones we just mentioned, can also indicate boredom or lack of interest, signaling you are not fully engaged in the conversation. So we ourselves don't want to do these things, and we want to read the audience so we can understand what's going on. Group discussion. Chip, is this you?
Yeah, so yeah, we want to talk a little bit about the branding and the physical environment and how that communicates to patients and visitors. So all of you are kind of are aware of our websites and and the branding things that we do. So what do you feel like that communicates to our patients and visitors? Uh, like the websites, the signage, all the branding components, the way that we present ourselves out to the community. What does that communicate to our patients?
Well, on your website, you want to be, you know, up to date with technology. You want to look dated and you know, have like, you know, 1980s graphics on it and things like that. So you want to have it, you know, up to date and active, so you look, you know, hip and relevant. And as far as you know, physical environment, you want a clean, you know, bright place that, you know, people feel safe in, and that they're not going to, you know, get any diseases or anything like that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Or Brian, so organized, yep. It's a good one. Yeah, to Seth's point, like when we want to be seen as professional and knowledgeable, you know, helpful, like easy to access, you know, safe, all of those things. I think we want to make sure that we're conveying with our brand. Okay, so so the website that like we were just talking about, we want, you know, if you think about Amazon and the way that their website is set up, it's very user friendly. You're able to navigate it relatively easily and get what you want. Those are the things that we want to communicate. And so I know we've got a lot of smart folks in DPS that work on this, and other marketing folks that work on this. And so that, you know, as far as being able to get our services, we want that those websites for patients to be able to go on and try to figure out where they need to go and how they can get help. So we want them to be able to be used on like any kind of device, because folks have so many different ones now with phones and tablets and laptops and PCs and everything else like that. So and then obviously loading quickly and responding in a timely kind of way is a big one. That frustrates the heck out of people if they're clicking on something and it doesn't load up. So those are the things associated with like our web presence that we try to convey. But yeah, some of the things as far as our branding elements. You know, this is a great picture because the N with the two dots there is the thing that we put out to everywhere. That's our brand that goes out everywhere. And you know, it looks simple, but there's a lot of research that goes into those kinds of things, and the way that we present it. You want it to be attractive and make a good first impression when somebody sees our logo or our facilities or whatever it happens to be. As far as that logo goes, you know, again, like I was saying, there's a lot of research that goes into that. Colors evoke certain emotions and perceptions of people. So aubergine, which is ours, obviously has a calming effect. So that's a great thing. You know, like if somebody's coming into one of our facilities, particularly if they're an emergency or something like that, you want to try to keep them calm. Blue is trust and professionalism. In the past, we had blue as part of our previous logo. Green is growth and environmental friendliness, that type of thing. So a lot of the commercials and stuff that we do, they use like a lot of the really high quality images and visuals and videos and that type of thing to talk about our services and what we provide to the community. So a lot of those are very if you've watched many of those, they're pretty slick. So so that I think sets a good tone. This is where it pops into more of our ballpark in regard to the the way our facilities look. So coming onto one of our campuses, you know, the landscaping, the cleanliness of the facility, that makes a huge impression when people first come into play. So if they see it's very well landscaped, everything is clean, everything it's very easy to negotiate. There's good signage and wayfinding and all of that stuff. It definitely provides a positive first impression for the folks that come into our facilities. And then as they actually come into the buildings, then you know, having that same sort of a friendly, efficient reception area or waiting space, having courteous folks be able to come up with them, ask them how we can help them. All of that, you know, plays into that first impression that people have of us. And so, you know, one of the things that you kind of think about is, like, if you're coming into the parking lot and like the place is overgrown by weeds and the building looks like run down, and you come into the building and and there's all, you know, what does that say about us? Like, to me, right off the bat is like, well, heck, if they can't maintain the building, what are they gonna? I'm not letting them operate on me if this is how they how they present themselves. So all of that is associated with the brand and how we present ourselves to the community, and the message that sends to folks. So I mean, that's a huge component of what we do as in our roles and how we support that brand. So another thing that we're as far as the way that we communicate, verbal cues are one of the things that we need to give to folks, and trying to make sure that they understand what we're trying to convey. So using the correct words at the correct time, words like important or crucial or must, you know, make sure that we get across the fact that, hey, this is important. What I'm talking to you about right now is really important. Also, from a timing standpoint, like phrases like as soon as possible, immediately, makes folks understand that the task is urgent, and we need to go ahead and move forward quickly. You know, also, like please complete by, you know, in instilling those deadlines also are another good way to make sure that folks understand that this is something that needs to be done quickly and by this date, so that we could move it forward. All of those roll up into calls for action for the folks that we're talking to. Your tone of voice communicates a lot of about confidence, empathy, urgency. So that steady, firm tone, you know, conveys confidence and that reassures people that you know what you're talking about. It's very persuasive. So if you're able to communicate in that way, that like people are saying, okay, this person knows what they're talking about, and I need to get on board with them and help them. From an empathy standpoint, using a softer tone, like a gentler tone, kind of conveys to somebody that they're being heard, they're valued. And then, you know, running at a faster pace, a higher pitch, kind of gets across to folks, you know, a sense of excitement about what we're talking about. And then one important a part of all of this, though, is trying to make sure that you're doing it naturally. So as you're doing this type of communication, you don't need to do something or talk in such a way that you ordinarily wouldn't talk. I mean, if you put on some sort of a false kind of facade, in a lot of cases, people will see through that or feel like it's not genuine. So you also need to make sure that it's natural in the way that you communicate this. Using very specific and precise language helps to make sure that you're getting the message across. And one of the things that we've talked about several times is avoiding jargon that people might not understand or would potentially create confusion. Seth was just talking about that, trying to make sure that the way that we're conveying technical information to people that may not understand that stuff. Also, if we have like knowing your audience is another piece to that. So we like if it's a group of us in facilities that understand those technical things, then that's another thing. But also making sure that we understand our audience from the standpoint of are there folks that speak a different language that potentially may lead to misunderstanding. So do we need to slow down a little bit and enunciate more specifically? Mispronouncing words is something that sort of detracts from your message. So obviously, if you're trying to get something across and you're throwing stuff out there where you're mispronouncing something, that people like are then focus on that rather than on what your message is. Variations in accents and dialects also make conversation more difficult. And again, I think we need to kind of slow down and make sure that we're enunciating as well as properly. And then also the person that potentially speaks a different language or accent, we can ask them to also slow down to make sure that we understand. Practicing active listening and avoid interrupting. That's a huge thing. I know that's one that I struggle with. If you're focused a lot of like if somebody is trying to communicate something to you and they've made some statements and you're already sort of formulating in your head how you're going to respond to that, then you're not actively listening to the rest of what they're trying to say, and so you may miss something. Or interrupting the speaker. So in a lot of cases, you're so excited about your response or what you want to add to the conversation. A lot of times you interrupt what the person is trying to say. That could lead to misunderstandings because that interruption may leave out something part of the point that they were trying to make in the first place, and not be able to convey what they were trying to say. So if you practice active listening, it gives you an opportunity to really hear and understand what the other person is trying to say, and you can sort of organize your thoughts and how you do want to respond when it is time for you to give a response. And then you encouraging listeners to ask questions. You want to make sure that everybody is clear in regard to what you're talking about there. So you really welcome questions to make sure that they truly understand what you're trying to get across. So, different personality types also play into this. So kind of what we were talking about a second ago, like somebody that is very extroverted may, as part of their communication, they tend to think out loud, talk a lot. They may potentially roll over the top of folks that are more introverted. So you have to be very careful in regard to if you are an extrovert, making sure that you don't do that, or if you are trying to facilitate conversation, that you're watching out for that, so that if somebody starts to talk over somebody else, that you make sure that as you facilitate that conversation, that you're getting all points of view. Part of that can also lead to misunderstandings and run into personality clashes. So if you've got somebody that is constantly walking all over everybody else, that may really aggravate the other people in the conversation. And so you want to make sure that as you have folks that do have conflicting methods in the way that they communicate, that you're again trying to facilitate that conversation and find common ground that everybody has to be able to get through that. So negative attitudes toward diversity can also create significant barriers to effective communication. So I think everybody is aware that Novant Health is very much engaged with ensuring that we have a good diversity inclusion focus, trying to make sure that we not only respect the diversity of all the different folks that could potentially be in the conversation, but we're also making sure that we include those folks into the conversation. Biases and prejudices in all forms have an impact on the way that we see things. Everybody has biases and prejudices, so hopefully we're able to kind of work through some of that stuff and be aware of some of those biases that we may have, and try to work through those and make sure that those don't come into play, but they do come into into play in regard to the way that we sort of receive information. If we have folks that are resistant to diversity, a lot of times they reject new ideas and stuff that somebody may bring forward because they have their mind so set against some of that stuff. It also creates a lack of emotional connection with some of the people that we're talking with. So if there is some sort of a bias toward somebody, that they come from a different department and they don't understand the way that we do things, so as they're presenting an idea that may have an impact on our department, we may dismiss it out of hand because we feel like that they don't understand what we do. So there's all sorts of different bias that we bring to some of these. So if we can build some sort of common interest or common ground with the folks that we are interacting with, that helps break down a lot of that bias and allows us to communicate more effectively. Cultural norms are another thing that dictates the way that we communicate. So we have to look for some of those things. Like a great example is this first thing in regard to age. So older generations preferring face-to-face interactions. And I'll tell you right from the get-go, I'm an older person, and I do prefer that rather than the digital communication piece. But others may like, hey, the digital thing is much more effective. It's more timely. Doesn't take as much time. I don't have to necessarily travel to get this this communication done. So we have to take that into consideration and sort of regard again our audience. Look at the audience with whom we're trying to communicate to, and try to figure out what the best way to communicate to those folks are. Cultural differences, we talked a little bit about that. Conway talked a little bit about the way some of our gestures and what have you might be perceived is something that we need to take into consideration when we're having communications with other folks. I already talked a little bit about this. Is sort of our personal biases and how we interpret messages or how we receive communication from folks that we might not necessarily agree with. A person's emotional state also may create a situation where it's the way that the communication goes through, the way you perceive information. Hey, if I'm in a bad mood or I'm angry about something somebody's trying to communicate to me, I may just not really be effectively understanding what they're trying to get across to me because of the mood that I happen to be in. So emotional intelligence is a critical component of leadership, and trying to understand basically how we're feeling and how the mood that we're in or whatever it may be affecting the way that I'm communicating out to others or the things that I'm doing, but also being able to understand others and maybe the emotions that they're going through and how I need to effectively communicate to them. Maybe I need to give them some time. Maybe I need to talk to them or let them vent first before we try to communicate other stuff. And so that's an incredibly important component to leadership, is understanding emotional intelligence. And then conversations, traffic, and other distractions interfere with hearing and understanding spoken communication. So again, Conway talked a little bit about this, but as we're having as we're talking about stuff, if there's other things going on in the background, there's other stuff happening, a lot of times it's very difficult to get your message across when people's attention is being pulled away from something going on around them. Another thing that we also need to take into consideration, particularly moving into leadership roles, is closed office doors and barriers within the environment that prevents communication. So there are times when it's appropriate. Obviously, if we're talking about an emotional issue with someone, we're talking about a confidential issue with someone, there may be some times when we need to close the door and have those kinds of discussions where other folks are not necessarily party to some of those conversations. But you also need to be aware that working with a closed door in a regular on a regular cadence creates a situation where people feel like, okay, well, this person feels like they're superior to me, maybe, or they don't want to talk, or I've got some questions I really need to ask, but the door is closed and I don't feel comfortable knocking on the door or whatever. And so it really hampers that communication. So that's a way bigger thing than a lot of times than people think that it is. And then we want to foster inclusive communication practices using all sorts of formats. So we talked about that earlier, just how we need to communicate to folks. And so we need to take into consideration the folks that we're trying to communicate to. So if they have hearing impairments, visual impairments, speech disabilities, we need to take that into consideration as to what's the most effective way to be able to communicate to those folks. So if somebody has a hearing impairment and we're trying to have some sort of conversation where there's lots of background noise, other people, like side conversations and that kind of thing, it's very difficult for somebody to be able to follow the communication when all of that kind of thing is going on. So we need to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. Also, like visual impairments, if we're providing like a PowerPoint presentation, and we have done so in such a way that it's very difficult to see some of the things. Some of the colors are not very contrasting colors that they run together. It's difficult to read some of that stuff. We have maybe folks that are that have some color blindness, and it makes it like we've got a graph up on the PowerPoint that's really hard for somebody to be able to see. We need to take into consideration all those things as we're presenting or as we're communicating to other folks. And then next slide. Also people with learning or cognitive and neurological disabilities. So in the environment within which we work, in hospitals and healthcare environment, there are lots of people that come into our facilities that have a lot of different ailments that can potentially impact how they receive information. So we need to again, as we need to take our audience into consideration and then be able to tailor our message to those folks so that we are being very, we need to potentially slow down, enunciate stuff very clearly, maybe repeat things to make sure that the message gets across correctly. Again, using visual aids as much as possible and trying to make sure that we do everything that we can to communicate that information in a way that they can receive it. That, like, if we have somebody that we may overload somebody, like we're trying to present too much information too quickly and they don't have a chance to process that. So maybe we need to slow down or split up our presentation or communication in ways so that they can get it in smaller manageable chunks, like we talked about earlier. With the email communication, maybe doing it in multiple instead of all together. So as we are trying to communicate malfunctioning equipment, we had a hiccup just a minute ago when Conway couldn't see for a few minutes. So that, a good example of how technology fails us at times. So we want to make sure that we have a reliable means by which to communicate. And then one of the really important things is having backup solutions so that if the PowerPoint that we had, we're not able to present that correctly, then maybe we also have handouts so that we can hand out to everybody and potentially go through and look at it in a manual type of way. So it's a really good idea to make sure that to kind of project out there and think, okay, well, if this all goes to heck, then how am I communicating out my message? Is there another way that I can do this if there is a problem? So another good way for us to talk about communication and making sure that we're getting things across to people. We talked about jargon in a couple of ways. We have a lot of of phrases and acronyms that we use throughout healthcare that may be an issue with being able to communicate out to folks. So we're going to do a really quick exercise here and run through some acronyms and see if everybody can tell us what these mean. So let's start. ITL. Does anybody know what ITL means? Anybody? Okay, so this is one from a regulatory standpoint, immediate threat to life. So this is so like if DHSR or it comes in, CMS comes in, if we have something that poses an immediate threat to somebody's life, they will cite it as an immediate threat to life. That's something that we would have to respond to immediately, or risk basically like our funding from CMS or what have you. But those are the type that typically would be what we would talk about, immediate threat to life. Next one, IJ. Does anybody know IJ? Okay, so this one is immediate jeopardy. So it's very, very similar to immediate threat to life. It's a term, again, that's used by Joint Commission and some of the regulatory agencies to signify that there's like an immediate need for action. We're putting somebody's health or safety into jeopardy, and we need to rectify it immediately. EOC, hopefully everybody knows what this one is. Come on, don't be shy.
End of class.
Yeah, we're getting to that. So,
Environment of care.
Environment of care.
environment of care. So I believe everybody is familiar with what environment of care means. That's through Joint Commission. DNV has a similar that basically is PE, or the physical environment. So that's kind of what we're talking about with EOC or PE. COP. And we're not talking about the guy in the blue lights behind you because you're driving too fast. This is conditions of participation. So this is basically what CMS uses. So where Joint Commission or DNV has their standards. Basically, CMS has the conditions of participation, and all of the standards that are built by DNV and Joint Commission are built on those conditions of participation. CFR. Does anybody know what CFR means? Code of Federal Regulations. So this is like OSHA. This is the when we get hit on OSHA things that basically all of that comes from the CFR. So there is like all the OSHA standards are federal like a code of federal regulations. And if you go back and look at those, that they have the little CFR numbers on those. So OSHA is one, but like EPA guidelines, there's a lot of different CFR like codes of federal regulations. S&C. This one is survey and certification. So we used to, we would get like letters from CMS in regard to changes to regulations and what have you. And so they would put out an S&C memo to let us know kind of what those changes are. And so again, it goes back to the conditions of participation that they put out and their interpretation of those conditions of participation. So right behind that is QSO. So they went from S&C to kind of QSO. So QSO is quality, safety, and oversight. So again, it's from CMS. Now instead of like CNS, the CNS memos, they put out the QSO, basically QSO memos. And again, it's interpretation of their conditions of participation. A quorum. Hopefully everybody knows what a quorum is. Does anybody want to venture a guess there? So that's when we have a group of folks, like a group that meets together or whatever, a body that deliberates. So like our EOC committees or what have you. When we want to make a decision, we typically want to have a quorum. So that would be a majority of the folks that are on that team, so that we can go ahead and move forward with business. Obviously, if we don't have a quorum, then it doesn't really make sense for us to move forward on things, because we don't have enough people to be able to make the decision or approve something. So arbitration. So anybody want to hazard a guess on arbitration?
We talked about this morning. So don't let him off the hook, Chip.
Okay. Yep. So somebody jump in there. Or I'll draw the conclusion that you learned nothing from the meeting this morning. Matt's acting like he's on the phone, so he doesn't have to answer. So,
Putting out problems, Chip.
yeah.
I can hear you.
So dispute resolution is a
No,
it. So
see, if
so we're agreeing to have somebody else come in and help arbitrate a difference of opinion and come to a resolution. So FTE, hopefully a lot of you know what this one is, just based on homework.
full-time employee.
Yep, exactly right. So when we're trying to determine how many folks we need, the FTE is that component, that 2,080 hours per year. And then SOP.
Standard operating procedures.
Yep, exactly right. So that's basically where we talked about policy and procedure. This is where it comes into play, what our standard operating procedure is for handling certain situations or tasks. RFP, I know a lot of us get involved with this. A request for proposals. So when we're having a contractor perform work or what have you, then we typically get requests for proposals for like basically pricing or what have you. So OPR with OPR. So this is one that I don't think that we necessarily use this abbreviation a lot, but it's the owner's project requirements. So basically when we outline sort of what we're looking for, our scope, our expectations, the goals for a project, that's we're conveying our project requirements. COI. So this one is a certificate of insurance. So in a lot of cases we're working together with like an insurance company that provides evidence that somebody has an insurance policy. So if we have a contractor that we want to make sure that they are insured before they do a project for us, then that gets into that certificate of insurance. ROI. It's not some guy named Roy. So this is return on investment. So basically, like on this one, we may be calculating sort of what, how quickly like a project may pay off for us. So we may be doing like a project to replace all the fluorescent lighting in a facility with LEDs. So we're going to have to spend some money initially to do that, but we're going to get a return on the investment based on the lower utility costs that we have. So we may be looking at the return on investment, like a specific time frame, like what the return on investment for this project may be within a year or what have you. So LTAC. I know some of you are probably familiar with this one because we have some of these. So it's long-term acute care hospital. So this is where we may have it's kind of like like nursing home, nursing facilities where we have folks that potentially will have like long-term stay or like rehab types of situations where they may be with us for a long period of time. SNF, or a lot of times we call this a SNF, or in some cases it's a SNF or a SNU. So that would be a skilled nursing facility or skilled nursing unit. So again, similar to like a nursing home type of situation or rehab situation where we have folks that are in our care for a longer period of time, or those types of facilities. BMT. This gets into clinical. So this you may or may not know this. I don't think that we actually have any of these facilities. So bone marrow transplant. So as that we may get into or interact with some facilities that do these types of procedures that associated with cancer treatment or what have you. So PACU, I think a lot of us know what that one is.
Post anesthesia care unit.
Absolutely right. Yep. Associated with our ORs. Yeah. So we a lot of times get involved with maintenance or projects associated with that area. So PICU.
Post anesthesia. Oh, there you go.
Pediatric
One.
intensive care.
Yeah, there you go. That's the one I was going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and we don't necessarily have these in a lot of our locations, but we do have some. So that may be one that you're not quite as familiar with. OPD. So again, so Matt Daniel would be familiar with maybe with some of these outpatient departments. So these may be they may be associated with the hospital, but may be either in the hospital or offsite locations where we treat folks. LDRs.
Labor and delivery room.
Yep. Exactly right. So yeah, basically this is is like one of the where the labor delivery and recovery take place, but then after that then we move them to postpartum patient room. All right, so some good examples of jargon, and you can see why we don't want to include that because it's difficult. So I think Lindsay's gonna.
Yeah, so I've got just a couple of books. I'll keep this brief. The Ideal Team Player also comes with a quiz. You can use this on your own teams and for yourself. It measures everyone's ability to be hungry, humble, and smart in those 3 different categories, smart being people smart. So what is your EQ? And of course, humble and is your ability to keep your ego in check, and being hungry is how motivated are you to move up, advance, or take on work. So it comes with an assessment, but the book itself, The Ideal Team Player, which is written by Patrick Lencioni. He also has a podcast. So if you're not interested in reading the book, that doesn't sound like a good use of your time, then I would strongly recommend the podcast. Very quick little episodes that he puts out on a weekly basis about being an ideal team player. Give and Take is written by Adam Grant. So it goes into the psychology of people who are givers versus takers. This is really interesting in terms of communication. The book provides some scientific research about how givers tend to be more successful in their careers and lives than takers. And then also like socially, how we might create a culture of generosity or taking, and he provides some really good examples of that. Adam Grant is a well-known author. He's every bit as popular as Simon Sinek. In fact, if you hear Simon Sinek, if you ask him who his worthy opponent is, it's Adam Grant. So both of them spend a lot of time focusing on like what makes people tick, and then providing scientific research, evidence-based research behind that. So Adam Grant talks about generosity, recognition, and providing a safe and supportive environment for your team, and also the importance of expectations and accountability.
So, sorry. So just to summarize, to wrap up, so we definitely from a professional communication standpoint, we want to make sure that we're choosing the appropriate communication method. So I think we've gone through a number of examples on that to ensure that we're being as efficient as possible and as clear as possible when we do communicate. When we do write stuff, that we want to make sure that that's clear and concise. So emails and use of phone calls for urgent, complex or sensitive topics. Text, we felt are best for quick and casual kind of communication or urgent responses. We want to hold meetings only when necessary, and considering the objective and the decision makers' availabilities, and then addressing the personal and the cultural and physical and technology barriers, and being mindful of nonverbal cues and all, while to make sure that we're getting understanding as we communicate. So that was it pretty much in a nutshell. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything that you want to say before we wrap it up.
Most of your homework in the next 2 weeks will be more focused on communication than conflict resolution. Your conflict resolution homework will be involved about identifying a workplace conflict that you've observed and recommendations or how you've seen that being resolved, much like what we practiced this morning. So pretty brief. The one for communication will involve actually writing a professional email and putting together a 4P, as well as selecting the right communication method given the scenario.
So sharpen your pencils.
Okay.
Hopefully we gave you enough information and it was understandable, and that you'll be fine and you knock it out. Don't worry about it. No problem.
And if they have questions about the homework, are you able to be available and answer those questions, Conway and Chip?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Please do use us as resources. I do know that there have been some questions in regard to some of the homework assignments, and so want to make sure that you all understand that the instructors are more than just the class. I mean, we're resources for you to be able to use if you have questions about any of the assignments, or as you put any of this into practice. If you know, if you're struggling with something, or you got a question about something, please feel free to reach out. Like we were saying, text communication is a good way to do that. I know a lot of us are busy, but if you shoot me a text, I promise I'll respond back to it, and then communicate in another way if we need to at a later time. But please do use us.
Absolutely. I'm always available.
Yep. Any last thoughts, or any observations, or anything that we can do better? As I know that you're going through a lot of these classes, and I'd love to know the things that you feel like are working well, or maybe the things that are not working so well, so that as we go forward, we can modify that and make it more effective. Y'all just want to go home,
I know y'all
right?
have something. I mean, you gotta have something. I know. Okay, can we call Matt and see what Matt has to say? I think he got something. He can say something.
Yeah. So yeah, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it right now, yeah, if you shoot an email to us and let us know, that would be really helpful.
I'm gonna call you, Conway, when I got questions.
Oh, call me. Call me. Gary, you got anything? Hutchins?
Not right at the moment, sir.
All right, all right.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody being on the call, and I look forward to working with you guys on some of this stuff in the future.
All right. Thank y'all.
All right,
Thanks, Chad.
thanks.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good evening.